Hello, everyone. My name is Delia Hagan. I'm from the Boston, Massachusetts area, and I am here to kick off our webinar today about expanding mentorships to center around Gen Z agency, advocacy, and decision-making. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got quite a large volume of participants today, which is so awesome. I think there's a lot of interest in this topic. So we're going to give a couple minutes for everybody to join before we get started. So hang tight for just a minute or so. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's collaborative mentoring webinar series. Our webinar today is about expanding mentorships to center around Gen Z agency, advocacy, and decision-making. And you're going to hear a lot from some fantastic panelists. We have a lot of interest in today's webinar, a lot of participants joining from all across the country. So very, very excited to welcome this incredible crew of voices that you'll be hearing from in a few moments. My name is Delia Hagan. I'm from Mentor National, based in Boston, Massachusetts. And I'm just here to kind of kick things off and go through some housekeeping before we jump into the conversation. So we can go to the next slide. And I'm just going to share some reminders about how you can benefit the most from this webinar. So let's start by sharing just some housekeeping. So all attendees on this webinar have been muted for best sound, but we do want to hear from you during this conversation. And we imagine a lot of folks on this call have a lot of insight about this topic too. So we ask that you use the Q&A button on the control panel at the bottom of the screen to ask any questions to our panelists throughout the webinar. We are going to have a good amount of time for Q&A at the end. So you'll be able to, have your questions answered towards the end. So feel free to kind of filter them in as they come to you, and we'll collect them towards the end. If we don't get to your question, we're just going to be trying to choose the ones that we think really enhance the conversation or might apply to the most folks. But you can always reach out to our speakers after the fact if your question didn't get answered. I also want to remind folks that we do have closed captioning and a live transcript button at the bottom of your screen next to Q&A if that's needed. And I think those are the big things. We do want to start by getting a little bit of an idea of who you are. So we have two short polls that are just going to kind of help us tailor the conversation a little bit more to who's on the call today. So we'd like to launch the first one now, and they might appear at the same time. So we'll see. But the first poll is, what is your experience level in the mentoring field? Are you a beginner, an expert, or kind of experienced in the middle? So we'll go ahead and launch those polls now, and we'll give you about 15 seconds to respond to this first one here. What's your level of experience in the mentoring field? All right, looks like we've got a good amount of responses in, so let's go ahead and share those results out. And it looks like we've got about 60% of you, so the biggest group that's on the call today is experienced, kind of somewhere in the middle between expert and beginner. And we've got about 30% of you all who would identify as beginner, and then a smaller percentage of experts. So that's great. And we hope that if you do have insight on this topic that you will share either in the chat or in Q&A. Thanks, everyone. All right, so now we're going to move to our second poll, which is, what is your role in the mentoring field? Are you a mentoring program staff person or a practitioner, a mentor, an educator, a technical assistance provider, or like a consultant, a researcher, a funder, or other? And if you do choose other, we'd love to kind of hear a little bit more about your role in the chat. So feel free to share a little bit more about yourself and what that means or what your role in the field is. So we'll give everyone about 5 more seconds to respond here. It looks like a really diverse group right now in terms of all the different types of roles that I'm seeing here. And let's go ahead and share the results. All right. Oh, okay. So yeah, more than 50% of you all identify yourselves as mentoring program staff or practitioners. And we have a few others kind of trickling in: researchers, TA providers, educators, some mentors as well. I imagine some of you would identify with more than one of these. So thank you so much for participating. It definitely helps us just have an idea of who's on the call today. All right. So if we move to the next slide. Just want to share, folks always ask, are we going to get this recording? If, do I have to take notes? Am I going to get the slides? You will. You'll get the recording, you'll get the slides via email after the webinar. And you can also access this information by going to Mentor's website in the next week. And then we're also always looking for your feedback and your input. So you will get a short survey that's just going to pop up as you exit the webinar. And all it takes is 3 minutes, but it really helps us take your feedback into account for the future webinars that we plan. So with all that said, it's definitely my honor to introduce our moderator for today, Ashley Hemme. So just want to share a little bit of context. I work at Mentor National, and Mentor is a close partner of the American Student Assistance, ASA, which is where Ashley comes to us from, and some of our other speakers for today. You're going to hear more about ASA in a moment, but ASA is a national nonprofit focused on helping middle and high school students navigate education to career opportunities. And they are really unique in their ability to connect with and learn from young people to ensure that all of their resources and research are centering youth voice and perspective. And so that's what makes this webinar so special, and one of the reasons we're so thrilled to partner with them for this conversation. So with that said, let me introduce Ashley briefly. Ashley Hemme is the Director of Corporate Social Responsibility at ASA. She's going to moderate our discussion today with our fantastic panelists. She is based in Boston, where she oversees ASA's nonprofit and school-based grants programs and partnerships, and the team who manages those relationships. Prior to this role, she taught 5th grade for 7 years, bless her soul, in Virginia and New Orleans, where she served as a Teach for America Corps member. Ashley received a BS in journalism from the University of Florida, and a Master's of Education in Curriculum and Instruction from the University of Virginia, and a postmaster's certificate in school leadership from Virginia Commonwealth University. And she's currently an Ed.D. candidate for Vanderbilt. So welcome, Ashley. Thank you so much for moderating and leading this conversation today.
Thanks so much, Delia, and hello, everybody. I'm so glad to be here with you all to moderate this webinar focused on Gen Z agency, advocacy, and decision-making. And just as Delia mentioned, we've got a large panel of really exciting folks that are going to speak about all their different organizations and programs. So again, I'm Ashley Hemme, and I'm going to moderate this panel. To add to what Delia said about ASA, we strive to change the way young people learn about careers, and we're devoted to shifting conversations around career exploration, school buildings, state capitals, state houses, communities, and through direct digital experiences. We are also a partner of Mentors, and we have been for the last few years, and we support various efforts across the organization, including their relationship-centered schools work, which focuses on helping school districts place relationships and social capital at the center of their work. And that actually steers us into the topic of this webinar, where we're going to talk about mentorships. Many of us present here today, by the nature of the work we do or our own personal connections with young people in our lives, know how mentorships, both formal and informal, can positively influence a young person's life. Generation Z is the group of young people ages 12 to 22, and so that's spanning middle school to just entering the workforce. And they're the age group that many of our organizations serve. They're a unique generation, one that prioritizes decision-making and autonomy in their own learning. We're excited to talk today about how we can not only center mentorships around young people, but have young people drive their experiences. So I'm going to share our agenda really quick before I introduce our first speaker. So we're going to have a presentation by ASA's own Dr. Kaylee Johnson, who will share ASA's research on Gen Z's values and interests. And then we're going to switch to our panel, which is comprised of both mentors and mentees, young people from 3 phenomenal organizations that are leveraging mentorships and relationships to support work-based learning and real-world experiences. And our panel will switch between mentor, big picture learning, and apprentice learning. And we're so happy to have them all here with us today. And then we will finish with a Q&A and some closing remarks. So let's get into it. I'm going to introduce Dr. Kaylee Johnson, my phenomenal colleague. Kaylee works for American Student Assistance as a market research manager. She uses quantitative and qualitative analytic techniques to offer strategic insights about career and college readiness, preparation, and exploration initiatives targeting middle and high school age students. Prior to joining ASA, Kaylee served as a UMass Paul Fellow, where she developed topical expertise in studying and analyzing public opinion, political behavior, and political communications. She also taught courses for the university as an independent instructor. Kaylee received her PhD in political science from the University of Massachusetts Amherst and her BA in political science from Stonehill College. Welcome, Kaylee, and I'm going to stop share so you can go into your presentation.
All right, thank you for such a great introduction, Ashley. All right, we are going to go ahead and share, and I'm going to change our view. Can everyone see this all right? I'm assuming
We
that's a
can.
yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. You know, after so many months now of Zoom meetings, I feel like I should probably stop asking, can everyone see my screen? But here we are. Anyways, it's my privilege to be here with you all today. And so I'm just going to level set a little bit around Gen Z, the generation that Ashley was talking about, talk about, you know, what we know about them, their decision-making processes, and their future preparation. As Ashley mentioned, having autonomy for their own selves is really important to Gen Z, and we'll begin to explore that in today's presentation. So for your overview, we're going to go through sort of what matters to Gen Z, what it is that they value, the pressures and the stressors that they're facing in their day-to-day lives, their decision-making journey, and the status of their future preparation. And what's informing all of this research is a variety of quantitative and qualitative research studies conducted between July of 2020 and January of 2022. I won't get into the specifics, but typically our group to whom we speak are 13 to 18-year-olds who are in grades 7 to 12, given that that is ASA's mission space. And I like to start off always talking about implications first. We'll return to them at the end, but ultimately, just to give you a preview of what's to come, Gen Z faces many pressures and stresses in their lives, but they really care most at the end of the day about being happy. Having a happy life is their #1 goal. They also care about various causes, you know, social causes, social issues, but they also really value spending time with their friends and taking care of their health. This really speaks to sort of how many different things this generation really cares about. Their decision-making process about the future, unfortunately, starts from a place of stress and anxiety. But after they foreclose on a decision, they do typically feel better, and they do seek comfort and validation from their trusted resources, specifically their personal connections, their friends and their family. We found overall that most teens are currently taking steps to prepare for the future. They feel confident about that future, but sometimes they lack specifics and they feel that they would benefit from more career exploration while in middle and high school. And of course, speaks to the importance of the groups that we have on this webinar today, who are so instrumental in helping young people begin to make decisions about their lives and be exposed to a variety of different careers and fields as they're just starting out. So first, we'll start with what matters to Gen Z. Overall, spending times with friends and their health are more important to Gen Z than things like gaming and fashion. So you'll see here this chart where you see Gen Z ranked what is not at all important versus what is very important. It's perhaps unsurprising that, you know, over half of teens rate all of these different things as important, but closer to 3/4 say that spending time with their friends and being fit and healthy are most important to them. You'll see there are other things related to their social life and sports and athletics, which are certainly components of spending time with friends and being fit and healthy. So these are the two sort of main things that they really are valuing in today's world. Oops, forgive me. As I mentioned earlier, another thing that Gen Z is really passionate about are social causes. And what we found in our research is that much of Gen Z is passionate about at least one cause, but fewer are actually taking action. So from this list, we asked Gen Z, you know, which of the following causes, what are you most passionate about? And we asked them to pick everything that applied. And so you'll see that their top causes they're passionate about are mental health, racial equity, COVID-19, gender equality, and animal rights. You'll see climate change in there as well for just over a third is something that they're passionate about, along with poverty and LGBTQ discrimination. We did see then, we asked them that follow-up of what issues do you actually take action on? And we found that there's a little bit of a disparity. So even looking at mental health, while half of teens are passionate about mental health problems, only about a third are actually taking action on that, which is what you'll see on the right. And you'll see similar relationships for all of these different issues that teens are really passionate about. But I would like to point out that only 6% of the teens that we surveyed in this case said that they weren't passionate about any of these issues. So it speaks to, again, in addition to spending time with their friends and taking care of their bodies and health, they really do have a societal view, like a sociotropic view, and they do care about issues that impact others. So moving on to Gen Z's pressures and stressors, despite all these different things that they're very passionate about, that really matter to them, they live in a world that's very charged by a variety of different factors, things that weigh on them personally, things that they have to do for school, and just society as a whole. So we'll get into some of what is causing Gen Z some pressure and some stress. So first, we asked around what kinds of pressures are facing Gen Z, and we subdivided them into three sort of different categories: social pressures, academic pressures, and what we're calling contextual pressures, or things that just kind of don't neatly align with social or academic, but I'll get into what that is in a little bit. So we know that teens are facing pressure related to all three of these things: their social lives, their academics, and sort of their larger environment or that context in which they operate. We see here that their top pressure socially is being a good friend. Their top pressure academically is getting good grades, which is all on the left where it says top pressure. And their top contextual pressure is earning money, followed very close after by having a happy life. So I know I said that having a happy life is their number one thing, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But here you can see this very complicated web of things that are really pushing pressure on Gen Z. And so it's, again, as much as they love spending time with their friends and family, there's also a lot of pressure related to maintaining good relationships and actually, of course, in the middle of a global pandemic, seeing their friends. And, while they want to stay healthy, you see there are other things that are really important to them, like being able to finance their lives, being happy, and finding a successful career. And of course, I'm sure all of us remember being in school and the pressures that we all face there. So that's perhaps unsurprising that, the group of teens that we speak with are in middle and high school. So of course, succeeding in school, having good grades, and then frankly, balancing that schoolwork with other activities, those are big pressures on Gen Z as well. And so we asked these same questions, and we were trying to look at sort of across Gen Z's journey from middle school through high school, how do these pressures change over time? And so while there are some differences in social pressures, some differences in academic pressures, having a happy life transcends their age and their grade level. If we're looking just at academic pressures, which is up at the top in the darker shade, you'll see that it's either having a good family relationship or making their parents or guardians proud. Those things kind of walk hand in hand at some level. With respect to academic pressures, which are the middle three bars in sort of the lighter shade, you'll see, of course, getting good grades and succeeding in classes. Those are also very quite similar things. But then you'll see the shift happen around 11th grade, where the top pressure is no longer just performing well in school, whatever that looks like. It's moving on to that next step of graduation. And then at the bottom, which is in orange, you'll see having a happy life. This is the number one thing for the largest percentage of Gen Z across all their different grade levels with respect to their contextual pressures. So that's why having that happy life is so very important to them. It's their number one thing at any stage in the game. So we know some of the pressures that Gen Z is facing, those academic things, those social things, and those contextual things. But those pressures are different a little bit than their stress level. There are things that might cause stress to Gen Z. So we wanted to know, how stressed out is this generation? And we'll say they're moderately stressed. On a scale from 0 to 10, with 0 being, I don't have any stress at all, and then 10 being, I feel more stress than I can bear. The average stress level that you'll see highlighted above this arrow is 6. So Gen Z is stressed out at a level 6 on a scale from 0 to 10. I would call that moderately stressed out. And you'll see the largest proportions circled, circulate in here around levels 5 through 8. So we have very few who are absolutely not stressed and very few who are feeling so much stress they can hardly bear it. So Gen Z is moderately stressed by all of these different, contextual pressures, academic pressures, and social pressures. And again, to kind of get into what some of these other stressors might be, just to drill down and view this data slightly differently, we see that there are, in addition to academic and social pressures, their number one stressor selected by the largest proportion of Gen Z right there at the top is living up to their own expectations. So that tells us that another pressure that they face or a stressor in their life is the weight that they place on themselves to do what it is they set out to do, to meet their own goals, to meet their own expectations. Followed, of course, quickly by maintaining high grades. They're also quite stressed out about things having to do with the future. So thinking about the future, choosing the right career. You'll see getting accepted to college or affording college is a stressor to a third of teens, roughly. And then you'll see some other different things as well, also related to, for example, COVID-19, other sorts of pressures. But again, the flavor that's added here and why I wanted to show this to you is, in addition to that academic and social context, the thing Gen Z is really feeling stressed out about is meeting their expectations for themselves. And on average, from this whole pick list, Gen Z have picked 4 sources of stress. So that should also give you a little bit of an impression as to why they're so stressed out. They're feeling some of these things very acutely, at least, an average of 4 of these things very acutely. So I mentioned that Gen Z's decision-making process, which we'll get into in a little bit more detail in just a couple of moments, is unfortunately started from a place of anxiety and nervousness. And that makes a lot of sense when we think about the contextual pressures in their lives, the pressure to do well in school, the pressure to have good relationships with friends and family, and the stress that they're just feeling at a baseline. That stress also, more specifically, having to do with meeting their own goals for themselves. So what you're looking at here is a chart that asks Gen Z, before and after you make a decision, how are you feeling these emotions? And we see ultimately that their mental health and their decision-making processes are really inexorably linked. Anxiety is something that unfortunately characterizes their self-reflection before they make a decision. You'll see overwhelm, anxiety, nervousness, confusion, frustration, fear, and feeling dumb. So kind of your leftmost on this chart categories here. These are all things that Gen Z unfortunately feels before they have to make a big decision, be that about their education, about something in their personal lives, about their career. And you'll see, 6 and 10 are feeling anxious and nervous before they have to make this kind of decision. But the good news for all that starting making decisions from a place of anxiety and nervousness is very challenging. The good news is that after they make a decision, you'll see an uptick in positive emotions. And so you'll see this on the right part of the chart. They're feeling educated, more informed, prepared, excited, confident, but the largest share are, of course, feeling relieved after a decision is made. So again, you really see that relationship between Gen Z's mental state, their mental health, arguably, and their decision-making processes. So again, while it ends positively, it unfortunately starts from a place of overwhelm, nervousness, and anxiety. And why Gen Z feels so negatively about decision-making? Why are they feeling so anxious, overwhelmed, nervous? It really comes down to uncertainty and fear of failure. So we asked some teens to open up a little bit about how they felt at the beginning of their decision journey. And the themes that we saw emerging had to do with uncertainty, feeling like I have no idea whether this was a significant decision or what impact the decision had. I didn't know if my decision was right at the time. I didn't want to choose wrong. And then we also have, unfortunately, a bit of a fear of failure, which makes sense in the context of meeting their own expectations being such an important stressor for them, a stressor for so many of them. Feeling I was afraid things would go wrong and I wouldn't make it to any of my decisions. I didn't know if I'd succeed and I didn't want to fail. So that anxiety and overwhelm around decision making is ultimately due to uncertainty and fear of failure, just not knowing every option that's on the table. So I've given you somewhat of a bleak outlook of Gen Z's decision-making journey, but I will reiterate again that once they've made a decision, they feel a lot better. And so I've talked about starting from that, unfortunately, negative emotive place and moving into a more positive frame of mind through the decision-making journey. And I mentioned when we were talking about those negative implications, emotions that Gen Z is feeling at the beginning of decisions, it's during their period of self-reflection. And so I'm going to dive into what that actually looks like, the self-reflection and the process of making a decision now with Gen Z's decision-making journey. So I'm going to walk you through this chart where a choice arises and then Gen Z moves into self-reflection. That's what I was referencing just a few moments ago when I was saying there's some, negative emotions that really enter this space, unfortunately. So Gen Z's decision journey starts when the choice arises and they move right to self-reflection. They're pondering what it is that they want or need. Ashley mentioned at the beginning of this webinar that Gen Z really wants a lot of autonomy in their decision making, and this is so true. And it's important to note here that this graph that you're seeing is cyclical. Their decision-making journey starts and ends with self-reflection. They might consult online research, they might consult advisors, but they are starting and ending with themselves. They are the final arbiter before they actually move to making a decision. So again, if you start at self-reflection, they might consult their advisors, meaning their personal connections like parents or guardians, friends, potentially significant others, and then also those in their lives with expertise, like their teachers, counselors, their mentors, in certain instances, doctors or medical professionals, for example. They also might bring in some online research, trying to find information on the internet, not only limited to online search engines like Google, but also including social media and being able to connect up with people through social media that might have some experience and industry-specific websites. So while Gen Z might iterate through this cycle a few times, again, the main takeaway is that it starts and ends with self-reflection. Gen Z considering what it is that they want or need, accumulating new information, being comforted and validated by the people in their lives, reflecting again before finally moving onto the right side where the decision is made. So what we're looking at here again is a little bit more of a deeper dive on their resources and when those resources are brought into that decision-making process. So after self-reflection, Gen Z ranks their parents or guardians as the resource that they consult first across a variety of different decision types. So across financial decisions, education and career decisions, as well as future-related decisions. The first stop on that decision journey, if we're looking back at that chart, is with an advisor, and that advisor is typically a parent or a guardian, the people who are closest to them in some ways, and the people who, have not only sort of the ability to comfort them and validate them, but someone who has lived experience, right? And so you'll see as we look over here on the right that Gen Z, when are bringing in roughly almost half are bringing in personal connections, media, and experts when they are completely lost about what to do. A larger share still are bringing in all of those resources after they've done some research, but before deciding. And then the smallest share are bringing in their resources after they've made a decision and need reassurance. So the main takeaway here, of course, is that middle column. The largest share of Gen Z are bringing in personal connections, media, and their experts. So with with personal connections and experts, both being part of that advisor cadre of resources to them. Again, after researching, but before deciding. So that speaks to kind of the first and final arbiter of their own decisions being Gen Z themselves, being the Gen Z decision maker. So they are doing reflection first. They've done some research on their own. Then they bring in these other resources before they ultimately foreclose on a decision. And so again, as we went through this process, the research that I just showed you was conducted a little bit earlier than the research I'm going to walk you through now. We wanted to understand still further, really, what is it that Gen Z needs from each of these resources? What is it that they're seeking out? As I mentioned to you, right, their parents or guardians, for example, might be a source of validation and comfort, which we found, but they also have lived experience. So we wanted to really understand, was it that Gen Z wants information, comfort, validation, or a directive from these important resources in their lives? And we found that teens typically do want comfort and validation from their personal connections, like their parents, guardians, and friends. Whereas from online search or their media resources, Gen Z is more typically looking for information and ultimately that makes some sense, right? With the people that they're closest to. It's a degree of being able to say, hey, I've been here, or I'm also going through this. This is a bummer. This is really challenging, or I understand that this is really hard, and you're doing the right thing type of thing. That validation, that comfort, the human connection element of it. Whereas from online resources, of course, Gen Z wants information. But something that also, again, speaks to the Gen Z decision maker being their own most powerful source is the fact that very, very few of them want a directive, meaning they don't want to be told what to do. They want advice, they want comfort, they want validation, but so few of them overall actually want somebody else external to them to tell them what it is that they should, and I'll use air quotes there, should do. And moving into the last part today, we're going to talk a little bit about Gen Z's future preparation. After all, their decision-making processes, right? This can be about any number of things, but given the work that we're all doing, it's important to think about this in the context of preparing for their futures. So first, we sought to get a state of understanding Gen Z's current preparation and their confidence about the future. And we found overall that most teens are preparing and they're confident, but there is some lacking information and clarity. So what I mean by that is that well over 2/3 of Gen Z say they enjoy thinking about what their future career may look like. They're confident they know of the different education options available to them and the job options available to them. But still, nearly half, 45%, say that they don't have enough information about careers to make a decision right now. When it comes to their confidence, we see the similar trends. Closer to 3/4 of Gen Z say they're confident they'll achieve their career goals, their education decisions will lead to good career outcomes, and that they feel in control of their future. But still, just over 4 in 10 say their plans for the future are too unclear. So I hope you can kind of see the connection that we're drawing here, that while most teens are preparing and confident, there's still a little lack of specificity. There's some information that feels as though it is missing to them, or that they feel is missing to them, and there's still some lack of clarity overall, with many of them saying that their plans for the future are indeed too unclear. But some of this sort of confidence and preparation is informed by the fact that Gen Z is exploring both career pathways and education options, but more are really exploring and learning more about careers as opposed to exploring education options other than four-year college. So you'll see here that, again, nearly 8 in 10 have explored and learned about careers, and 2/3 of them say that they're confident they know about job options best for their future goals. When it comes to education options, just over half have explored other education options other than four-year college. So things like apprenticeships, other sorts of trades, community college, things like that. But you'll see, again, roughly 2/3 say they're confident they know of all the education options available to them. So there's an opportunity here as well. And finally, overall, when it comes to the state that Gen Z is at with their career exploration, we found that both current high schoolers, as well as those who have graduated from high school, say that they feel they would have benefited from more career exploration. So almost 7 in 10 say they would have benefited from more career exploration in middle or high school, while only between 1/3 to 4 in 10 say that they feel they actually had adequate access to enough exploration opportunities while in middle or high school. So overall, just to wrap up and reiterate what we just said, we've walked through sort of the many pressures and stresses Gen Z has in their lives. And again, to reiterate, they really care most about having a happy life. We know the things they value, right? Different various causes, but also spending time with their friends and taking care of their health. We know that Gen Z's decision-making processes about the future are unfortunately riddled and start with stress and anxiety. But the good news is that after the decision is made, Gen Z feels a lot better after the fact. And we know that as the decision-making journey starts and ends with Gen Z, but they are bringing in their trusted resources for comfort and validation, and they're seeking internet information often. And we know teens are taking steps to prepare for their future. They feel confident, but there is some specificity lacking from their plans, and they feel like they would benefit from more opportunities to explore careers and other options while they're still in middle and high school. So I appreciate your time today, and I will turn it back over to Ashley.
Thank you so much, Kaylee. Before we switch to the next panelist, we actually have some questions that are specific to your research.
Okay.
So if you could stay on for like another
Certainly.
few minutes while we go through some of those questions, and then
Certainly.
we'll have a Q&A at the end for the rest of the panelists. So in the Q&A, I see two questions that I'm going to kind of tie into one. So there's questions around the demographics of the research.
Yes, that's an excellent question.
And so how certain
yes.
aspects, I'll just add to that, certain
Sure.
aspects of Gen Z may be different across race and ethnicity, gender, refugee and
Yes.
immigrant households, income level. Expand on the diversity of this research and how the research was sure not to invisibilize or erase experiences. And that second question is about where this is coming from and looking at youth across different income levels.
Yes, these are all very excellent questions. All of the research that you saw is nationally representative across a variety of different demographics. It's matched to the census based on our most recent ACS data, so that we can be sure to account for representation around race, ethnicity, gender, regional, different regional differences, and we do our very best we can to index for different income levels as well. It's very important to ASA that in general we have that national representativeness in all of our research to avoid exactly the kinds of pitfalls that research can fall into when it comes to not creating space and voice for our participants in our research. I'll also note that this research was a mix of qualitative and quantitative data. There's a particular richness that comes from qualitative data because we can more directly solicit the stories of youth in words that are meaningful to them as opposed to just sort of pick list responses. So it was important to me today to be able to show you both aspects. And we see in qualitative research more opportunity to engage and probe around a variety of different issues and account for so many different kinds of backgrounds that Gen Z might come from. Without getting into specifics, we did see responses, especially in those qualitative work, for youth who were unhoused, for example, and just had different life experiences and in different stages of life. So to the overall question, we do our very best to assure national representativeness in all of our studies, and like I said, we index as closely as we can, while of course allowing for a little bit of stretch here and there, just because that is the nature of survey research, but we try to index to the ACS most recent data to account for proportional representation of different demographic groups across the United States.
Thank you. And then I'm actually going to tie in another two questions here. So this one's kind of interesting. Do we know what comprises having a happy life for those surveyed? Like, what do they mean by that? And there's another kind of wondering here about the stressor regarding the future. Is that related to career or also the environment? So like having a happy life and then that stressor about the future, do we have any insight on that?
So good questions. Going to take the latter question first. So about the future, when we do pick lists, we include the future as something somewhat vague and amorphous, and we include response options. When we include something that has to do with the future that are more specific around education and career. And we do it as sort of almost like a control mechanism to just see if we don't name it, if we leave the future somewhat uninterpreted, if there are major differences, just to see if they're something between a general idea versus something more applied like education or career. It accounts for a little bit of variability in interpretation intentionally, but we do always drill down and include different options that are more specific to education and career. So there's a very good question follow-up. It's just kind of a way we want to make sure that we can capture the sort of amorphousness of the future, and B, not eliminate anybody based on whatever they're thinking about an experience. Perhaps education might not apply post high school to some, but the future certainly does. So we leave that a little bit open to interpretation intentionally. The other question was having to do with having a happy life. We included that in the studies that we have done without defining it. It's something that is very, very personal. And it is up for interpretation. I can think of a few different contexts where we've included having a happy life in our research questions. but it is not something that we name out for Gen Z. We feel, I can see multiple perspectives on whether or not we should enumerate what we mean by happy life, but we also don't want to impose our own researcher-held biases on our respondents. We would ask that question differently. So we left it, again, somewhat amorphous because happy is an incredibly subjective thing. So the short answer is no, we don't define it, but I wanted to give you the reason why.
I have one last question before we move
Sure.
on to our next panelists. Please feel free to keep asking questions though. Kaylee will stick around for the Q&A at the end as well. Can we compare Gen Z decision-making with other generations? How does this compare with other generations of teens or even with adults today?
That's a great question. I can say that ASA's mission space has focused exclusively on Gen Z. We know that there are, based on the different stages of life that one is going through, my argument, based on what I have read about millennials and Xers in particular, based on different stages of their lives, the types of decisions that they might be making might rise and fall in a different way. So perhaps deciding on a career field might be something that Gen Z might be dealing with, versus an elder millennial might be deciding whether or not I want to stay in this current job, whether or not I want to transfer to another organization. An Xer at the upper end of Xers might be considering, do I want to remain in the workforce, just to use kind of a family of decisions. So to their processes, it is not something that we have studied with other generations. It's something that I'm happy to look into, and we have begun to with other generations' decision making. But I can't necessarily speak to how different the processes might be. I can speak to the fact that Gen Z certainly wants autonomy, and I can speak to the type of decisions that are particularly salient to them given where they are in this stage of their lives, but I can't necessarily say this is like millennials, this is like Xers, this is like boomers. I can't make that comparison right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Haley Johnson.
Thank you.
And we're gonna actually switch to our next panelists right now. Please feel free to keep asking questions. I will also include our contact information at the end of the slide deck. So you can always reach out to us with more questions, or if you're interested in more of our research, we're always happy to answer those questions as well. So I'm excited now to introduce, or reintroduce, I should say, Delia Hagen, and introduce Karina Nova. And so they're here from Mentor. Delia Hagen is a licensed certified social worker serving as the Senior Director of Program Operations at Mentor. In this role, Delia supports the development of the National Mentoring Resource Center, a comprehensive online resource hub for the mentoring field. Delia also manages national programmatic initiatives, including mentor trainings and supports for corporate partners, and training and technical assistant efforts for Mentor's National My Brother's Keeper Success Mentors Partnership. Delia began her career in mentoring at Big Brothers Big Sisters of New York City, where she managed a mentoring program for youth impacted by the incarceration of a parent, supported effective relationship building for mentors and mentees, and provided case management to mentees' families. With her team, she also designed and facilitated an innovative group mentoring curriculum promoting positive health outcomes for middle school youth in under-resourced Brooklyn communities. Subsequently, Delia served as a social worker in clinical settings, providing counseling and case management to adults living with HIV and AIDS, and young people in mental health crisis. Delia also had a background in grant writing, program development, and group work. She earned her Master of Social Work degree at the Silberman School of Social Work at Hunter College and her bachelor's degree in Psychological and Brain Sciences at Dartmouth College. And then today we also have Karina Nova with us. Karina Nova is the Program Associate at Mentor. In her role, she supports the work of the National Mentor Resource Center and works with the research board to create content for the NMRC blog and resource profiles. She assists the program team with coordinating webinar logistics, drafting consultant contracts, responding to general inquiries about mentors' work, and additional administrative tasks. Karina was born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts. She's a graduate of Boston University, where she received her bachelor's degree in sociology. Karina is an alumna to many youth mentoring college prep programs such as TRIOS, Upward Bound, Suffolk University, and Success Boston. She has volunteered as a mentor with organizations such as School on Wheels, Boston Partners in Education, and Upward Bound, Suffolk University as instructor's assistant for the youth group's Restorative Justice Circle. Through her schooling, mentoring, and community, she has developed her passion for working toward closing the gap of inequity she sees in the world around her. Thank you, Delia and Karina, for joining us today. So to start our conversation off, I'd like to ask how Mentor creates a culture of mentoring with a focus on young people.
Thank you, Ashley. And I'm sorry we gave you such a mouthful with our bios. I'm going to cut those down.
Impressive bios, right?
They're long, no, but thank you for having us. And I can start us off and then kind of kick it to Karina to talk about her experience at Mentor 2 internally. I thought I'd share a little bit about what we try to do externally, and we're certainly on a learning journey in terms of the work that we do in the mentoring field, and then trying to also mirror those values at home in terms of our office space and our office culture and the workplace relationships that we try to build. We're a small but mighty team. I think we're between 35 and 40 folks at Mentor National now, and we're growing really fast. And so I think that presents some challenges for us in terms of how we cultivate relationships, on our team, especially during COVID. I know so many organizations have struggled to, support relationships when people have to go virtual and hybrid and back and forth. So, we really, it's important to us to build those values in terms of the way we are, as a team, and then also to do the work that we do externally to build relationships. So I'll just share a little bit about what we do in the field for those who don't know. And I think you heard a little bit about us from Ashley earlier, but we, Mentor National, our mission is to close the mentoring gap for the 1 in 3 folks young people who don't have a mentor outside their family. So they don't have someone that they can rely upon to show up for them outside their family. Of course, parents and families are important too, but we know it takes a village, and we know it's important to have new experiences, new relationships outside your family too. So we're really working to close that gap through, research, technical assistance, training, supporting mentoring organizations that are formal, like your Big Brothers, Big Sisters, your YMCAs, your Boys and Girls Clubs, those types of things, as well as, systems change. Like, how can we bring more relationships into schools? How can we bring more relationships into workplaces, right? And so that's really the work that we try to do with ASA, and why we're so thrilled to be a part of this conversation with ASA. One of the big things that Ashley mentioned earlier is our relationship-centered schools initiative. So this is really our work that we do with schools to help, and districts as well, to help them reflect on, the ways in which their environments are or are not relationship focused, right? So are there a lot of barriers to students connecting with each other, to students connecting with supportive adults in the school environment, right? So kind of helping schools see, are we really centering relationships? And we know relationships, we know based on the research that we've done over the years, similar to what was shared by Dr. Johnson, that relationships are a vehicle for growth, for learning, right? And so if you don't have positive relationships in your life as a student, middle school, high school, and beyond, you're not going to be getting the most out of those experiences. You're not going to be connecting as much to new experiences and new, learning opportunities. And so that's what we're really trying to work toward together. And in a couple of weeks, we're actually launching our first ever relationship-centered school summit. So if you're interested in that event, we can kind of drop some information in the chat. But it's really just kind of helping schools and districts be more strategic about how they center relationships and facilitate relationships in schools. And we think that's really important because, as much as we try to support communities and community-based programs and, formal mentoring programs, we know like schools are places where kids are going every single day, right? Young people are showing up there, right? So what untapped potential for, if they're not finding those supportive relationships there, then that's a really kind of untapped resource. So that's, one of the reasons we're so excited about this work, but I'll kick it over to Karina to just share a little bit about kind of what we try to do internally to reflect some of those values that we're trying to bring to the field.
Yeah, thank you, Delia. And also thank you, Ashley, for such a welcoming introduction to us both. And thank you for having us on this panel. Yeah, so I think going back to the question, I think Mentor fosters a culture of mentoring for young professionals and staff, both through, formal ways and informal ways. So one of the formal ways that we do it at our organization is through a mentor pair program. The program pairs team members who don't typically work together, often maybe because they're not on the same department, or as we refer to it, the same team, right? As a way to really check in, whether that's quarterly, sometimes it could be weekly, bi-weekly, tri-weekly, whatever that relationship needs to check in, not only on like career goals, maybe for the individual, but also just wellness check, right? And making sure that we're learning from each other and having the opportunity and the space to do so. And Mentor also just launched in in April youth ambassadors program, and they also have mentor pairs. So that's something that these young people, it's a cohort of 10 young adults ranging from 18 to 24. And it's really an opportunity for them to learn about the positive impact that the nonprofit sector can play, right? And then the role of mentoring and how it can help young people thrive and strive to achieve whatever goals that they have for themselves. So they get to, through that cohort, they get to rotate between our different teams to really learn more from each of us, but also from their cohort mates, right? So they're grouped into, although there's 10, they're grouped into like groups of 3 or one group of 4. But that way they're able to learn alongside each other and alongside us. So I think that's a way that we do it also internally, and then kind of informally, right, through the work. Even with our ambassadors program, and we also have a National Mentoring Resource Center Youth Advisory Board council, they learn alongside us through the work that they do. We always check in to make sure we're understanding what skills do they need to not only do the work that they're doing here with us, but what can we help them build upon so that they can take it into careers as they continue to move on with their journey, right, in the workforce. And so we really try to be intentional about that. And that's a little bit of how we do it internally.
So amazing to hear. I think something I really admire about mentors' work is, and to Delia's point earlier, like reaching schools and supporting schools, but then supporting all the different stakeholders or entry points essentially for a young person. It's an effort that takes everybody to create meaningful relationships with young people, whether it be formal or informal. Karina, another follow-up question to what you were sharing. What are some other ways that Mentor is working to center youth voices?
Right. Yeah. So back in February, Mentor applied to be a part of Restless Development, which they're an organization that works on meaningful youth engagement globally. And we applied to be a part of their Meaningful Youth Engagement Lab. And the Design Lab is really a cohort of 8 other nonprofit organizations that are a part of this learning and, practice community to discover ways to be more intentional about meaningful youth engagement for each of our different organizations. So currently we just did a research to get like a baseline of where we stand, not only at Mentor National, but also like with our affiliates, right, on how we are engaging youth in our organization and what does that look like, right, to kind of get feedback from the different partners. So we did it with staff, we did it with our affiliates, we did it with the young people that we have currently in our organization, and we even did it with our board to kind of get that overall like high level scope of how people are perceiving or like meaningful youth engagement, or how people believe that we are doing that. And from there, we'll create an action plan on areas that we think we may need to, that there's room for strength, right? And there's always going to be room for improvements when it comes to how to be more intentional and how to be more meaningful, right? Because you always have to check back in with these young people to make sure. That's how you'll know if it's working, right? It's through them. So that's one of the ways in which we're doing that. And like I had mentioned, we do have a National Mentoring Resource Center Youth Advisory Council. And that's currently, we have 4 members on that council who support our National Mentoring Resource Center work. So whether like products that we're putting out, trainings, webinars, things of that nature, guides or anything like that. And they support by putting in their perspective or identifying any gaps that we may have missed, right, that they think should be filled in some of the work that we're disseminating. And that lab that I am a part of and another colleague of mine, Tara Span, really has given us new ideas on how we can continue to engage them in areas where we can invite them to or bring them to the table, right? To continue to give their feedback. So that's one way in which we're using that design lab to really implement changes to continue to like improve the way that we work with our youth.
Interesting. And Karina, as a young professional, so this is more of a question about your own experiences, both at Mentor and then like as you were entering kind of the workforce. As a young professional, can you share about some of the informal mentorships or formal mentorships that you've experienced so far in the workforce?
Yeah, of course. So I was at community college prior to going into Boston University. So I did 2 years there and then I did the transfer. And while I was there, I was a part of the Success Boston program. And I had a coach who really supported me. Like, and sometimes being in college, I just needed those simple reminders of like when's FAFSA due, like deadlines, important things that you don't want to miss, but also how am I going to transition into either continuing schooling or what does the workforce look like for me? And she helped me out with like helping me search for interest. Like she got to know me, how I am, my personality, and things of that nature, and really helped me identify internships or job opportunities that will really be a resume builder, but also resonate with me, which was super important. And through that, I actually got a position as an intern at Eversource, where I worked in their diversity and inclusion HR, under their HR department. And I met Tara, who's funny enough, I actually work with Tara now. She works at Mentor National, and she was the one who let me know about the position based off of, once again, that one was a little bit of an informal mentorship that kind of ensued from me being an intern there. Not only did she get to know my work ethic, but she really took the time to get to know me at an individual level. And through that, she has, opened her network to me, which is super important, right? That's a big piece of mentoring as well. And through that, I applied for this job because I felt like it was a really resonating fit with my background and things that I'm passionate about. And then I was able to get this position. So, whether it was in college and then the people who I'm still connected with my Success Boston coach, or, I'm still connected with Tara clearly as I work alongside her in this organization. But it was really in those settings that built that networking space for me, that built up my social capital in that way, that helped me, move into the workforce a little bit more easier than maybe had I been doing it alone.
Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you both so much, Delia and Karina, for sharing. They're both sticking around for the Q&A toward the end. So I'm excited to move to our next panelists. So next we have another really amazing partner of ASA's, Big Picture Learning. We have Andrea Purcell and Izzy Fitzgerald here with us. Andrea Purcell is the Program Director, Project Insight, and LALTL at Big Picture Learning. After a fairly traditional, successful K-12 experience, her eyes were open to students and communities who were underserved in schools as an undergrad at UC Santa Cruz. She developed an interest in culturally relevant and compatible education that led her to graduate programs at the University of Hawaii. And she met incredible local educators working to empower Native Hawaiian and other youth in Hawaii through programs addressing current community challenges. As a classroom teacher, she works to bring what she had learned into her own practice. During those teaching years, she was introduced to Big Picture Learning. The simple foundations of structuring learning opportunities around relationships, relevance, and rigor resonated deeply and have informed the work she's done as a teacher, principal, and consultant for the past 20 years. She believes in the power of education to battle the inequities pervasive in our communities. And then we have Izzy Fitzgerald here. Izzy Fitzgerald was born and raised in Southern California. From a young age, she demonstrated her creativity and curiosity. And up through middle school, was never satisfied with the way in which she was educated. She enrolled as a 9th grader at the San Diego Met High School and has engaged in a series of learning experiences that reflect her eclectic interests, including entrepreneurship and fashion design. Most recently, after successfully completing an Introduction to Sociology course at Mesa College, her interests in global climate change and politics were sparked, and she began an internship in the office of San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria. Andrea and Izzy, welcome. So happy to have you both here today with us. So my first question to you, Andrea, is to share a little bit more about BPL's mission and what BPL does. I mean, their mission literally is, it says it in the mission statement, putting students at the center of their own learning. So can you share a little bit about how BPL does that?
Sure. Thank you for having me, for sure. And I'm super appreciative to be talking to this global audience. Just based on folks who are chiming in the chat, I see we have folks from Mumbai and Toronto, Philadelphia, Kentucky. I saw somebody who's local to me, Santa Ana, California. I'm here in the LA area as well, in Colorado. So I'm very heartened that we have a community like this to discuss these really important things about how we can structure the experience of our youth. And our current youth is Gen Z, of course, that we're talking about today, the 12 to 22-year-olds. Big Picture Learning has been doing this work for over 25 years. And then our co-founders, of course, for much, much longer than that. So we're talking about, there's a lot to say here. And I know that we have a brief time. So of course, my invitation is to all of you to reach out if you want to know more information about anything that we're talking about today. Our co-founder, Elliot Washer, I want to start with something that he says frequently, that from a big picture perspective, the community is the classroom and the student is the curriculum. And we've really developed our programs in school and out of school on that premise. When we talk about student-centered learning, we are also talking about student interest-driven learning. I heard echoes in that in what Kaylee was saying. I heard echoes in that in what Karina was talking about in her lived experience. I imagine that we'll be hearing from Izzy some resonance and reflection of that statement as well. We really think of ourselves as educators in our schools as learning with the student, that's our role. The student is not somebody that we are imparting knowledge to or that we are sort of artificially directing. To use what Kaylee was talking about, we're not telling them what to do. We're asking in a very authentic way, what is your current interest right now? And how can we help you investigate and pursue that interest? I want to make the distinction also between what we mean by interest and the more specified field of career interest. I heard in the research that Kaylee was talking about Gen Z folks, there being a finding that Gen Z folks didn't feel confidence in sort of what their decision-making process was. We don't limit interest to career interests specifically because we want to know that whatever you're interested in passionately and deeply and authentically right now, we also recognize there can be multiple interests coexisting at the same time, that interest is valuable and that there is deep learning that can happen that will impact your ability to be a productive citizen, be a confident and engaged person, be productive in the workforce or in college or wherever you decide to go post-secondary, in investigating whatever is fascinating to you right now. Kind of thinking back to our own experience as 12, 13, 14, 15, even 17-year-olds, sometimes you can talk about a trajectory and a story where you knew with certainty what it is that you wanted to do and what kind of work you wanted to do. But more often than not, your ideas shift and change as you have experience and that they pivot. And so what we really want to let our youth know and where in our schools and wherever we're working is that that is not only okay, but that's actually a valuable part of your journey to be able to recognize and value that what you're interested in right now is preparation enough for whatever it is that's going to come next in your life. We tie the programs, I'll talk very briefly about them and then I won't take up too much more time because I know we're short here. We tie our programs, which are in most of our schools, we have about 200 globally, by the way, that in most of our schools around an advisory structure where that relationship-centered education really starts. We talk to students about their authentic interests, and then students in our schools have time and space during the school day to be able to go and work with professional mentors in their fields of identified interests. That's in a triad with their school-based advisor, with the student, and with the professional mentor as critical partners in all of that. That's our program piece in a very, very brief nutshell. I also want to talk about very briefly, or at least plant a seed about how important it is that those programs are tied to our evaluation structure. So we not only say that we value these things, but we measure what we consider matters, what we know what matters for post-secondary success in both the workplace and in college. In a very brief outline, we measure interest and interest development. We measure practice, what kind of skill development and what kind of experience students are having in building up their social capital and in pursuing their interests. And we talk about relationships because we know that, especially with the populations that we work with, that the building and leveraging and maintaining of social capital is a critical factor in student success afterwards. So I'm happy to answer questions about that. And then there's a lot more to talk about.
Yes, I know. I feel like we've got such a packed panel, but we could spend an hour and a half with every individual organization, right? And talk even beyond the hour and a half. But Izzy, so glad to have you here today. I wanted to ask a little bit more. I read your bio to the group, but was hoping you can expand a little bit more on your experiences, like how important have internships and work-based learning experiences been to your educational experience, however relationships played into that. If you can share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I am now at the University of San Francisco in the Bay Area, and I would not have, like, honestly looked into going to higher education if I didn't go to a big picture school. I didn't think that past community college was an option for me, and therefore I came into the high school space not thinking that I was going to go above and beyond for grades, for opportunities, anything like that. And so when I went to the Big Picture Learning School, I mainly went there because I saw the campus and I thought it was really cool, and the caf food looked really good. So I was like, this is perfect. Like, why not just go there? And it was really close to where I lived at the time. And then I found about the internships and the college opportunities and fell in love with it. But honestly, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I had no idea what internships I wanted to have and what classes I wanted to take. And for me, I always knew I wanted to help people, and I communicated that with my advisor. And he noticed in me that I would always come in, like, I would dress up, I would wear like these fun little outfits. And he was like, why don't you try working at the thrift store for a little bit? And I ended up working there for 3 years as their mannequin merchandiser. So I did all their window displays anytime I would come in. So I had that wonderful opportunity, but it also taught me that's not what I want to do for actual job. So that's when I started having to investigate, and my advisor and I were always talking about politics. COVID hit, and so did the BLM movement. So I started writing poetry about it. I got to write a poem with my principal, my old principal. She's no longer there, but Melissa Agadello. We got to write a poem together. And so through that, I got to learn a lot about myself and a lot of where I could take myself. And I feel like the most important thing I learned is the importance of believing yourself, and that it's okay to feel the imposter syndrome, but to not let it stop you. I feel like that's the biggest thing Big Picture brings to the table, especially with my internship at the mayor's office when I was back in San Diego. I would never believe that I would be allowed to do that in the first place and be able to express myself. So
it's amazing. As you were talking, I was thinking about like how important it is for young people to like have all of these experiences, to also to see what they don't like, right? Like to be able to know, like beyond, like by the time you're making decisions about like where to go to college, or like if to go to college, or like whether to take out student, like being able to have those experiences then is so critical. Which kind of leads into my next question, because I feel like that's like a little piece of advice I always share about programs, giving as many opportunities as possible to try out different hats and doing that as much as possible. But Andrea, to you and Izzy, what advice do you have for either youth seeking opportunities or organizations that may want to offer internship opportunities? What kind of advice? So this is a question to both of you.
Maybe I'll comment very briefly, and then Izzy, you can bring this to life with your experience at the San Diego Met. So we believe both that student interest should drive the seeking of opportunities, but that they should also drive the process. So, in most of our schools, we are asking students to be co-participants and to use high school language, to hustle their own internships. So it's not about creating a database of folks that are sort of pre-vetted, although, there's some value in that as well. There's leveraging of the existing social capital in the community and of the school, but we also believe that students, when they are speaking authentically and passionately, are the best people to put forward. If they want to work with a mentor, with an organization, or pursue an interest, and they go and speak from the heart to folks, it's very hard to say no to somebody who's coming to you and saying, I'm fascinated by the work you do, and I really want to spend more time learning with you in that context. So I don't know if that was your experience, Izzy, at the San Diego Met, that you had an opportunity to do that kind of exploration and build the skills for your, like, advocating for yourself in the process.
Okay, so I have a lot of different experiences. I would say for me, the only internship that I had that was within the program was my first one, which is the thrift store one. And then all the other ones I had to put in, which means I had to go find those internships with my advisor or on my own and ask them if I could be an intern. And so for me, that's terrifying. I'm not someone that likes to go and ask people for help and therefore asking them if I could help them as well. And I, even though I feel like sometimes I come off as this like big, vibrant personality, in the inside, I'm very, very shy and like I like to be reserved and I just don't like to cross lines. And so for me, when my advisor told me I'd have to go on my own and email these people and even see them in person by myself, I was terrified. And so the advice that I would give is that these people are just like you. They have a background just like you. They have a history, they have a story. And if you want to do something, just go for it. The worst thing that you can get is a no. And often you won't even get a no. And if it's a no, it's usually not right now, but we can come back to this later. And it's also okay to get a no. And if you do get a no, it's okay to be upset for a little bit and then move on to the next thing and then figure out where to go from there. You have supporters. That's what your advisor is there for. That's what big picture learning is there for. And so my biggest piece of advice is just go for it. Ask the questions. Don't be afraid. These people are just like you. I understand adults can be scary sometimes, but I've had to keep reminding myself that adults are just people that are older than me, but we communicate the same way. We still have the same mindsets most of the time, and all those things. And also, I just wanted to say on the advice on people looking to have interns of young age and in high school, flyers are a really big thing. That's how I got my mayor's opportunity. They had flyers posted around my campus and my advisor took a picture and sent it to me because I had graduated early. So he was like, we're still in contact to this day. Like me and my advisor are still in contact to this day. So he sent me a picture of the flyer. And yeah, I would honestly just say like having genuine conversations with the youth and young people and treating them as if they're your equal is how you're going to get interns in the best way, and also really good interns is because you're going to be treated as equal as them.
Thank you for that. I think that's huge, right? To be able to just everybody see each other as who they are, right? Like seeing everybody else as people. I think that's a massive part of this. Thank you so much, Andrea and Izzy, for being here and sharing. They're both going to stick around for the Q&A at the end. I'm going to move along to our next panelists here. So our next group I want to introduce is another really phenomenal partner of ASA's Apprentice Learning. Here we have Letta Neely, the Associate Director of Program Operations with us. So Letta is a poet, playwright, and the Associate Director of Program Operations for Apprentice Learning. As a lifelong activist for social justice and liberatory change, she believes that providing work-based learning experiences for young people are about equitable accessibilities to a good life, one that surpasses survival. Interesting real-world work experiences at early age broaden the landscape of one's aspirations and provides essential keys to previously locked doors of opportunity. She's also the parent of an Apprentice Learning alum and a resident of Dorchester, Massachusetts. And then here we have Lanisha Cespedes. She's a peer leader and student apprentice at Apprentice Learning. So she attended the Jackson Mann K-8 school as an 8th grader. She participated in Apprentice Learning's virtual programming during COVID. She then became an intern at our city hybrid summer internship during the summer of 2021. And during her 9th grade year, Lanisha became a paid intern in their Launch Plus virtual program. This summer, through Success Link, she completed a 5-week employment with Apprentice Learning as a peer leader for this year's completely in-person city summer internship, and that was her first job. Welcome, Letta and Lanisha. So glad to have you both here with us. Letta, I'm hoping before we really kind of get into the questions, if you could just give a little bit more of an overview of what apprentice learning does and what programs it provides.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Letta, as you all know, and I'm so happy to be here and be a part of all of this. So apprentice learning, we provide real world work experience for middle grade youth in direct partnership with schools and employers and families. And the students, we leverage career exploration to teach skills, ignite purpose, and to nurture dreams. And that's pretty much us in a nutshell. The programs that we offer are workplace explorations for 7th graders, apprenticeships for 8th graders, city summer internships for rising 9th graders, and a Launch Plus internship for 9th graders.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Letta. Lanisha, I shared a little bit about your experience with apprentice learning, but can you share a little bit more about that and what you learned through those experiences?
Yes, of course. I'm sorry if it's a little bit loud, but during apprentice learning, I definitely learned a lot. I learned how to use public transportation on my own. Before apprentice learning, I never knew how to get anywhere by myself. It definitely taught me how to be more responsible for what I can do on my own, rather than like, asking my parent for help, asking a teacher for help, or, anything like that. So it also helped me like choose my path in career and what I wanted to do. Before this, I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I was really, confused, lost. And apprentice learning, like they showed me many work explorations that, sparked something inside my head that I was like, oh, maybe I want to do this when I get older. And they also, gave me opportunities to learn more, which I took upon. And, I definitely got lots of information from that. And the information stuck with me until now. And I definitely still look for, job opportunities that have the same, path and what I want to do and what I learned with apprentice learning.
Awesome. Can you share a little bit about what you want to do? Like, what have you enjoyed?
From like apprentice learning, what they have showed me is real estate. I never knew like I really wanted to do that until, I went on a work exploration where it was like, they showed us buildings, they built them and stuff. And I was like, I really want to do this. I really like talking to people. I really like being like a salesperson. So, I've seen like many like things that led up to me being like, okay, this can be my career in the future.
That's awesome. And Boston's such a great place for real estate. Speaking of somebody who lives in Boston. So really, really cool experiences. So Letta, I think what's really interesting about apprentice learning's work is it focuses on middle schoolers. So when we think about career readiness or work, like preparing for work, the workforce, or internships or work-based experiences, we're usually talking high school and beyond. But can you share a little bit about how apprentice learning centers middle school and its work and how it exposes middle schoolers to different careers and pathways?
Yes. So our values play into this pretty profoundly. Our values are possibility, authenticity, and connection, right? And so the connection is that young people, we know that what you see is what you can become. So if we open up the possibilities and broaden the horizon of things that you can see, then you can opt into all of those possibilities for yourselves. What we know is that for the world in general, people of color in particular, the options for what you see of yourselves, right, that is promoted are not necessarily the most beautiful and definitely not the most true. And so we provide these experiences for young people so they can opt into their future, they can opt into their greatness, they can access it, all of those things at an earlier time, and have opportunities to do those things.
Amazing. And then my final question here is to Lanisha before we kind of go into Q&A after this. Lanisha, you touched on this a little bit. So you are in 9th grade now, right? And props to you, I just wanted to say, for calling in from school. And then you had a test earlier too, which is amazing. So we're so excited to have you here today. How does this impact high school moving forward for you, your experiences with apprentice learning? What are you kind of thinking about as far as like even classes you want to take or experiences you want to have? I think you might be muted.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Yep.
Okay, so For high school, right? I'm actually in 10th grade now.
You're in 10th grade now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's the same with like, people classes. Like I was really not a people person. I wasn't the type to, take initiative or speak up about my opinion because, I really thought like it really didn't matter to anybody else but myself. But, doing like apprentice learning, being around people who valued your opinion and taught you how to speak for yourself, like really opened something. So, in classes I really do want to take is, like it's like psychology, I want to be like a people's person, speak to people because I learned that I can actually, make a difference with other people besides myself. And what things I speak on can influence other people to do better. So, I really enjoyed that. It helped me open up to be who I am today and in high school and going on in my life.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Letta and Lanisha, for joining us today. I know we've got about 10 minutes left in the webinar, so I want us to get to, if we can fit in a few questions. So I'm going to go really quick through some of our slides right here, but anybody who's attending will get these slides afterwards. I wanted to share some free resources that ASA provides for anybody who would like to center youth in their programs and think about career exploration and career readiness in that way. So we have 2 digital programs, one just released last month. So ASA Next Voice is a digital platform focused on youth advocacy. So lots of tools there to help young people talk to anybody from policymakers to their peers about the issues that they care about. And that's a free platform. We also have ASA Futurescape. It's a virtual platform designed for students who are interested in exploring different education and career possibilities. So those are both 2 free resources we're going to send along to you. And then we also have 2 resources focused on developing programs. So the first is a career exploration playbook we wrote with the Association of Middle Level Education that focuses on middle school career exploration programs and has anything from implementation guides and case studies to lots of varied resources. And then with our relationship with Big Sister Association of Greater Boston, we created a toolkit for community-based organizations and out-of-school time providers and strategies to create programs for youth and build mentorships. And so this slide deck will be available to everybody after the session. We also have everybody's contact information in here as well. So if you have any questions for anybody specifically, our information will be here. And I'm going to pass along to Delia to kind of close out this part and see if we can fit in like a few quick questions.
Definitely, and we do have some really great questions that have come in throughout the past hour or so. So excited to get to those. So yeah, just briefly share some resources for Mentor. We share these every time we have a webinar, but we want folks to know about our affiliates. If you're looking for any kind of mentoring support for a mentoring program, initiative, affiliates locally are just fantastic resources. So you can find the link there to show you where we have them. We also encourage any mentoring program that's trying to recruit volunteers to sign up for the Mentoring Connector, which is kind of the only database of its kind that allows you to look up mentoring opportunities by zip code. So if you're looking for a mentor, you can use that too. If you're looking to become a mentor, you can use that too. So it's a great resource. And then the National Mentoring Resource Center, which we've mentioned a few times, is really just kind of a one-stop shop for research to practice resources for all different types of mentoring topics. And the next slide, I think we've just got just some reminders around answering the survey questions, the email that's coming to you with all of these resources. And then I think finally, just a reminder about our next webinar, which is coming up actually in 2 weeks. We have 2 webinars for you in October, special treat. And this next one is on rural mentoring. So we hope you can join that as well. But I think we're going to pause here and just take a couple of the great questions that we've gotten over the past hour. And I'll start with one that I just thought was really fantastic. And I don't know who to gear this towards, because I think it was initially for Dr. Johnson, but I think it really could be answered by anyone. And in particular, I'd love for the young people on the call to be able to answer it. The question is, do you think that Gen Z can ever be properly prepared by the older generation? What I mean is that times are constantly evolving. So there's a gap in decreasing the connection between us and older generations. So how can older generations actually pass down help or guidance And when does it not really land? Like what kinds of, ways are most effective for folks to kind of pass wisdom down to younger generations and which ones are not? So I think, I particularly love to hear from the younger folks on the call, anyone who identifies as Gen Z, but maybe anyone can jump in after that.
Okay. I would say there's a couple things within this. The first thing I would say is to move from the feeling of needing to prepare and help and move into the space of support instead. I feel like that's where youth and adults, when they try to co-create or try to help each other, that's where they start to go like this instead of like that. And it's just because I feel like we're both in this mindset of, oh, I don't know how to help them because there's this age gap, or the same thing other way around. And instead of looking at the age gap, again, like I said, people are people and minds are minds, and communication is, if we're able to speak to each other, that's all you really need. And the best thing to know how to support someone in an ideal mindset is to just ask, how do you need support? Where do you need me? How can I help you? If they don't need it, just be there, wait for them. They'll need it eventually. So that's what I would highlight for sure.
Thank you so much. Anyone else want to jump in and answer that one?
Yeah, I think I could just add, piggybacking off of what Izzy said, it's just the idea that some of the solutions that would have worked prior were in a different time, right? So sometimes understanding it's just exactly that, like taking the time to really understand what is needed, what, folks are saying and asking for versus thinking, people like may have the solution to a problem that they don't understand fully, entirely, right? Because it's not them going through it at that time. So I think that's another piece of it.
Yeah, I would third that. I think that adults, those of us that are very grown or at least purport to be, think we have all of the answers, and we also have a lot of the fear, right, about next steps. Sometimes we feel like we've made it this far, it should be enough. And I think we can look at the generations before us to remember that feeling that they had about us. And so just being open to the relationship, right, and the trust and the care between younger folks and older folks to look for guidance in both directions.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Johnson, any thoughts from the research on this one that emerged?
Can you all hear me now? Okay, there we go. Luddite. So I think, you heard it right from young people themselves. I think what it comes down to, right, is what we saw is seeking comfort and validation and seeking information are two different things, and different resources are used for different things. So as people who are a little bit further along in life, presuming we know everything when we absolutely don't is just the kiss of death. So I think what it comes down to, and that speaks to why it's really important to be, a comforting and validating resource when we are approached with the sort of more emotional side of decision making and emotional side of planning is being really key. And it's great to be a resource of information when approached for that as well, but definitely making sure to pair that and addressing some of the more sort of emotive things that go into the process. I would say again, you heard it right from others, but that's what I think I would take away to tie into the research.
That sounds great. And I'm going to squeeze in one more really good question specifically for Karina and Izzy. And this one is about social capital. So thinking about like the social capital that every individual brings in from their own life, like the relationships and the connections that you already have, and then how, older folks can actually support young people in making more connections. Is there a secret to that? Do you feel like there's a balance, in terms of like leveraging what you already have versus what other folks can provide in terms of networking? Anything you want to speak to about that would be helpful, I think, for this audience.
Yeah, I guess I can kick us off this time. I would say that I think that older folks are people who you view as mentors or just, caring adults or whatever that looks like, right? Or even your peers, right? Because that's another part of it. There's a lot of peers mentoring each other, right? I think that it helps build social capitals just to be able to get the young person or the individual into the space, right? And also prepare them for that. Like Izzy said, I look very extrovert, right, on the outside, but sometimes I am pretty shy, like, and more introvert. So I play the field on both, I guess. And so sometimes being prepared for like the room that I'm going to go into, and being able to know how I can speak to people, like just what, and just have it be a little more casual sometimes, to also find those settings where it's not so formal every time, right? Because that makes it a little harder for more introvert folks. But just find ways to do it in casual and formal settings and things of that nature. I think it could help build people's confidence to then be able to approach others and to carry these conversations that will then lead to like building, you know, their network, right? And sometimes it's the people that you have as acquaintance who open doors for you that you didn't even know were there, right? So it doesn't have to be a super deep relationship with everybody, but just having the skills to be able to feel comfortable enough and confident enough to be able to be in those rooms and to be in those settings. And I think that that comes from whoever it is that you're looking up to as a role model, whatever age range that might be, right? Creating that space or helping you navigate that space.
Karina, how about you, Izzy? Any last closing comments?
I would say the same exact thing, especially if you are coming into the space of wanting to help. Professionalism and casuality is so important. Me and my advisor never emailed each other. It was text and the occasional phone call. And that's how I like to communicate, and that's how he liked to communicate. And that was perfect for us. And I feel like for a lot of teachers, especially, they feel like they need to come at it with a place of professionalism or just an education period. But if you want to have someone open up to you, you want to have someone feel comfortable, and comfortability is usually in casuality, not in professionalism. However, there's also a period where you need to set your student or your person up for success in professionalism. So teaching them how to email is incredibly important. The business casual outfit, incredibly important. For a whole week, I had to keep texting my advisor, like, what do I wear to the mayor's office? What am I supposed to, like, how am I supposed to be presentable? Like, especially as a person of color who has curly hair and the piercings and the tattoos. For me, systemically, I don't come off as professional. And so for me, I had to have those conversations with my advisors and the people around me on how to be comfortable in my setting and how to make sure that I don't feel like an imposter in professionalism, but also making sure that I can be my true self in all kinds of ways and all kinds of capacities. And now I know how to do that in any business setting. And now I know if I want good, and because of who I am, I'm not set back with that. So yeah, professionalism and casuality is so important, and I'm highlighting that to the max for sure.
Wow, you packed a lot of wisdom into the last few minutes of this webinar. I think that's why everyone stayed on, even though we're a little bit over. So thank you guys so much, just to all of our panelists and to Ashley as our moderator. You all just shared so much to think about. And I think the word is thought-provoking to sum up this webinar for sure. There's definitely more to the conversation, but just want to thank you all so much. Ashley, any closing words from you? No.
I don't think so. Just thank you everybody for joining us. It was a great discussion today. Thank you.
Thanks again, everyone. The information about the next webinar is in the chat. It's on October 20th. And if you can't make it, it will be recorded and disseminated, so you can reach out to us to get that information as well. Look out for the resources we're going to send via email. And thanks everyone for joining today. Take care.
Thank you.